you talk to $1 million business and, they're barely profitable, right? They're just in a not great spot. And they're like, well, how am I supposed to learn from a $50 million business? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're talking about one idea. Maybe you can't implement 100% of it, but you can implement some of it, right? And we take in $1 million businesses to 10 million to 20 million, right? It's the same concepts. A lot of people think, $150 million business, that's entirely different than mine. Well, I mean, here's my problems: recruiting, retention, getting the guys to open their mouths, being thorough, answering phones quickly, right? It's all the same stuff. I just have it at scale. So when I have it at scale, I have to be more creative with my solutions, uh, which works out because you could steal that creativity no matter what size you are and use the same techniques.
Welcome to the Lion's Den, hosted by Lance Bachman.
Hey, everybody out there in the Lion's Den, welcome today. The big cat's out of the den doing some work, so the digital shark's working it today. I'm super pumped to have one of the leading experts in the home services space on with me. Been somebody that has been around HVAC marketing for a long time. We run in a lot of the same similar circles as far as people that we know in the industry. He represents clients, small to large, specializing in companies that have gone from 6 figures to 8 figures to even 9 figures. So I want to welcome Mr. Josh Kelly of Clover Marketing to the Den. Josh, how's it going, bud?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat and to get myself in some trouble today.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to get yourself into trouble.
Just a little bit, not
but
too much.
Before I kind of get rolling, I always like to take an unconventional approach to just
Okay.
have a wrap conversation, because these conversations can literally go in 1,000 different directions, 1,000 rabbit holes. So we're going to talk obviously about your journey in the space, but I'm going to throw some rapid fire questions right out of the gate to let people know, forget about Clover, forget about Parker, forget about all that good stuff. We get to find out a little bit who Josh is first and
Okay,
foremost.
let's do it.
If you weren't a marketer, what would you be doing?
See, that's a weird question because it's like saying if I wasn't a man, what would I be? Like it's like I don't know. I've been a man my whole life. Like it's pretty hard not to be. If I weren't a marketer, I mean, I've been in operation. I've been a COO. I'd probably be in sales.
Sales? Okay.
Yeah, I love sales. If marketing is sales, it's the same thing. I guess that's a cop out, but sales.
All right. If you could have dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would you be having dinner with?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. Why?
I just think it would be fascinating. I think he's just such an interesting person and would be like if you're going to sit down for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you could do this smartly and get a lot from it. And I would choose like that's a good call maybe, but I feel like that would be one of the most amazing conversations you could ever have. I don't know. I just think he's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I'd want to have dinner with Jimmy Fallon.
That'd be a good one too. That'd be legit. You're going to laugh the whole time at least.
Like,
There's a big benefit to
did
that.
you ever see when him and Post Malone went to Olive Garden on his show?
I did not know.
If you get a chance, YouTube it. You're gonna die laughing. That might be somebody I'd have dinner with too. Is Post Malone, just because of the fact is the guy's completely nuts and has gone from zero to hero all in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
we can make this list real wide if it's like all the people that would be super amazing to go dinner with. Right?
I was on a podcast the other day and I was surprised. I wasn't on a podcast. I was listening to a podcast and I was surprised. It was a gentleman by the name of Mario Compriano. He owns Express Electrical Services, and he was on a podcast and he said, if there's one person he could have dinner with and it wasn't his dad, it would have been George Brazil.
Oh, George, yeah. He was a character too. I knew him real well.
Yeah, because of what he did from the home services space. So I thought that was a pretty interesting response.
I mean, I think George Brazil like really is kind of a galvanizing person, but no matter what you think of him, there was a time where he was the most innovative person in the industry and absolutely changed how all of us think about this business. So I mean, I've had lunch with him before on multiple occasions. One time in his house where he was wearing a robe, and that's a different conversation. Um, but yeah, he was business wise such a brilliant creative mind, especially, from the 70s to the 90s,
It's
more or
almost
less.
to say he was ahead of his time.
Oh, he 100% was ahead of his time. There's no question about it.
And you look at the number of businesses that he's influenced, the way that they do business.
Oh,
Whether,
us,
yeah,
for
whether
sure. I
in
mean,
the
it's
next
not,
door
across the
community,
board.
everybody out there, people who market, people who don't market, his impact is across multitude of facets, not just one. So
You
I
know,
thought,
the thing is, if you're in HVAC and plumbing, most people know who George Brazil and most people know who Parker and Sons is. Most people know who Horizon is, right? Um, but outside that industry, there's a wealth of industries that would have no idea who George Brazil is, but they're still influence them. They just haven't ever put the name or the face to it, right? Because he was, he just thought differently. I remember in his office, he had his poster. It wasn't his office, really; it was his house, because he lived on the second story of his shop. They had this poster on the wall where he had George Brazil trucks all over the city, and then he had a train, and then he had a blimp. And like I remember thinking, like, well, why would you want a blimp, George Brazil? Like that seems extreme. The guy got a freaking blimp. You know what I mean? Like he did it. It's like it was a goal of his. He's like, I'm gonna get a blimp. He got it bought from like Germany. It was like 120 grand, and they had to pay like a pilot 100 grand a year. Plus, it was so expensive. I remember he called me in for a meeting. He goes, "Hey, I got this blimp," and I was like, "It's really expensive. Would you want to do the other side?" I'm like, "But George, like, aren't you just gonna have like one side facing the crowd the whole time?" He goes, "Yeah, no, probably." I'm like, "Well, then, no." It's like I don't want to do that.
oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Um, what senior superlatives were you nominated for, or did you win?
My high school didn't really do that. Is that boring? I went to a terrible high school apparently, but it didn't really happen.
Well, if you had to get one, what do you think it would be?
If I had to get one, oh, most likely to shoot themselves in the foot. I don't know. I got nothing.
That's a good one. That's a good one. But I'm
Uh,
never going to the gun range with you if that's.
there you go. There you go. There you go. Fair
Um,
enough.
what's something that our listeners, outside of what you've accomplished in your professional career, would be like, whoa? Like somebody asked me this question the other day, and I was like, I was a lifeguard in Virginia Beach 30 years ago, and they're like, dude, look at yourself. You were a lifeguard, and I'm like, yeah, I actually was a lifeguard 30 years ago on Virginia Beach.
Something a lot of people don't know about me is I'm a black belt in jujitsu. How's that one? Yeah.
Is that something you just started out of high school or post? How did you
After college,
start?
so I wrestled,
Okay.
right? And then after college, I got kind of out of shape, which happens when you stop working out, and I had all the same eating and drinking habits. So I looked for something, we kind of talked about before the start that really got my competition going and
Yeah.
got me in that back of that team atmosphere. And like, I don't mind working out. I do it, but I don't really enjoy like just lifting weights. There's not like a purpose to it.
Yeah.
So I thought jujitsu was like an easy transition from wrestling. And I remember this is a true story. So the first day, now I was a pretty good wrestler. The first day I went to jujitsu, I ended up rolling with a 110-pound Asian girl, and she choked me out 5 times in like 5 minutes. And I remember thinking, like, this shit's witchcraft. Like, I gotta figure this out. This is unacceptable. And
Oh
I
my.
remember like I got meaner, right? I'm like, oh, I was too gentle the first time. And then I got real mean and like it got worse. I'm like, oh no.
She used everything you had as aggression against her.
Yeah. No, it wasn't like I was being gentle. No, I was trying to murder this little Asian lady.
Now, did you wrestle her later? Did you have jujitsu?
Yeah. Once I got better, it was different, obviously.
You made sure that she knew who was boss in the jujitsu circle.
Not,
Well,
not exactly, but I did better. So there you go. Yeah.
so long story short, those are my rapid fire questions to kind of get things flowing. But talk to us a little bit about how does somebody from Cincinnati first and foremost kind of get out to Phoenix? Let's start with that.
So it's business. That's the honest, simple truth. I grew up in Cincinnati, but we moved a lot when I was younger. Um, my father has worked many jobs, but he was an accountant at Roto-Rooter, got into operations at Roto-Rooter, and then ended up getting, running Service America down in Florida, and then became a part of, not to date myself too much, but Blue Dot. So we're Blue Dot guys.
Yeah.
And he ran the whole West Coast and eventually was the VP of marketing and sales, I think. Don't
Yep.
quote me on that. For all of Blue Dot. So we came out to Phoenix when I was in high school um, to, for him to work at Blue Dot. So I mean, it was pretty pivotal to me. But I moved a lot when I was a kid, so it didn't really bother me. But the way he sold me, we lived in Florida at the time, and I was cutting grasses like crazy. There's fire ants and all this stuff. And he goes, "Hey, Josh, in Arizona, we wouldn't have grass." I'm like, "I'm sold. Let's go."
Let's go. I'm out. And so you go to Arizona State.
Yeah, went to ASU.
All right. Home of the Gronk.
Home of lots of people, including Josh Kelly. But yes, home of
Um,
Gronk was U of A though, not ASU.
I thought he went to Arizona State.
I'm pretty sure he's U of A. I'm pretty sure.
One way or the other, he still was there partying.
He for sure was there partying. There's no doubt about that.
Um,
Party school, for those who don't know, still got an education, but I'm probably one of the few. So
um, so you graduate school,
yeah.
and you get started right into the family business kind of at that point.
No, so right after college, I worked for ESPN for a short period.
Okay.
It sounds like a dream job on paper. It wasn't. I realized real quickly corporate's just not my style. I didn't like wearing a suit and tie. I didn't enjoy that. It just didn't feel like me. So my father kind of talked me into coming and working with him at a company. Actually, yeah, he had just bought the company Parker and Sons, and he needed help on the marketing side mainly. And I had marketing, that was my degree. And I had helped some of the Blue Dot companies with marketing, just small things while I was in college, right? And then in ESPN, I was doing that.
So in
So
transparency, Parker and Sons at this point that you go to start working there is doing what? What kind of revenue?
6.5 million.
6.5 million, probably what, 40, 50 tech, somewhere in that ballpark at that time?
Yeah, no, less than that.
Okay.
Because we were doing AC and plumbing. So we were probably 25 to 30 trucks.
25 to 30 trucks.
Or 25 to 30 team members. Yeah,
All right. Is it
yeah.
fair to say that Parker and Sons at this point in time is the largest HVAC company in the
Here's what I can tell you. It's for sure the largest single market company. I believe we're the largest one outside of a franchise. We did 150 million last year just in residential service, just here in Phoenix.
So let's talk about Parker and Sons a little bit and kind of
Yeah,
your
yeah,
escalade
yeah.
there as far as what you've done and where it's gone and just the things that one of the things I heard you say in a recent podcast where you were talking about it is being the big fish in the
Yeah,
market and dominating it. Can you
yeah.
talk a little bit about that? Because there's a lot of ways you can be a big fish. You can be a big fish and say, I'm going to take that small radio station that probably has 50,000 listeners and I'm going to dominate. So nobody else who's listening to that hears anything but Parker and Sons. Was that kind of your mantra that you went for as far as in looking in the different? Because when you're that big, you got to keep the mojo going at all times from a lead gen standpoint and understand what's working and what's not working. So what was your kind of mantra with the big fish in the small market?
So, I mean, now we're a big fish everywhere. We don't even worry about the market, right? We could outbuy people, and it's terrible. But like, if we have a strong competitor that buys into a radio station, I don't care how big it is. I'll just outspend them. Or Parker and Sons, really, just Teen runs the marketing now. We'll just outspend them, drive them off the station, and then cut the budget, which is amazing position. But I understand why everyone hates that. In the beginning, we didn't have that option. We didn't have a large budget. In fact, we had almost no marketing budget, but we had to get calls and we had to drive business. So we focused first on getting the most out of every business opportunity we already had. And then when we started marketing, we really focused initially on geographically. We tried to own neighborhoods, hire techs from the neighborhoods, have the techs hang out in those neighborhoods, do all the direct mail. We did door hangers. We did the yard signs. We had the guys get gas in front of that neighborhood. We had the guys eat lunch in front of those neighborhoods, just trying to own spaces because I couldn't afford even a cheap radio station. It just wasn't realistic. Um, because when we bought it, it wasn't making money. I mean, we barely made payroll if we're just being 100% honest. Not the case anymore, but it was not easy in the beginning. Not that it's easy now, but it's easier in different ways. Um, So we did geographically, and then once we kind of graduated beyond that, we continued to do geographically. We just switched neighborhoods and became got into larger neighborhoods and tried to own places. And then yeah, radio stations, like I couldn't afford. George was the big guy in town when I started.
Right.
They were, probably, 25, 30 million at the time. And we were some podunk little company that had some marketing money. So we weren't a truck in the truck by any means. But we weren't slaying it either. So I bought places where other people weren't. I bought smaller stations. A good example is like Phoenix is an incredibly conservative town. I know the election may not have shown that entirely in the last one, but it generally is, especially back then. And there's a bunch of conservative radio stations. And everybody played real heavily on those conservative radio stations because they were the big stations. And there was one really small, really cheap progressive station. And
Right.
I was like the only one who knew about it. I was like the only marketer. There were like 5 people on it. And it was this tiny audience, but this tiny audience was like the most loyal audience you could possibly ever have. So it was like I look for those kind of opportunities to be in different places, to have a different message, to sound and look different than other people. Because I couldn't afford to go head to head with at the time much larger players because I would lose that battle every time. They could outspend me, and even if my message was 10 times better, they could outspend me by 10 times. And my message, not every message I wrote was as successful as the others, but their money was always good.
Did one of the things that in our pre kind of calls and talking about was tracking,
Yes.
and how from your perspective that could be the single greatest asset that you have to any organization that you work with. And we'll talk a little bit more about Clover.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you're good.
we'll talk a little more about Clover, but talk to me about your viewpoint on tracking.
It's the most important thing you could do. So like,
Isn't it amazing how many either whether they be small to medium sized home service businesses really truly don't understand. They give you the proverbial when you're having the conversation. You know, my assistant takes all my calls and she knows, she asks on every call, how did you hear
yeah.
about this?
Oh yeah. Oh
That
yeah.
one's
Yeah.
the one that I love the most. How did you hear about us?
Well, I mean, and that's a fine way of lead sourcing, but it better not be your only way because it's not accurate. And by the way, here is a leading question if you're on television or radio. So don't say here. It's where you want to find our phone number when you're lead source, or where'd you find our phone number today, which is also leading, but it's less leading. Um, but so tracking is the most important thing we do. It's amazing to me. Like the closer to the numbers you are, the bigger influence you have. It's just that simple. And I use this analogy. If you were playing a basketball game, imagine a basketball game where you just played, but there was no scoreboard, and at the end, you tallied up the score to see who won. That's what most businesses do. Now, some businesses do it at an annual basis. They get a P&L at the end of the year, and they're like, "Oh crap, we lost 100 grand. I wish I would have known that." Better businesses do it monthly. Good businesses do it daily.
It's
So,
it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things that our CEO Lance we just did this week in our leadership meeting is we shopped our own business. And you see so little people really truly shopping their own business. We went and listened to lead calls, we listened to review calls, we listened to Zoom meetings, that the way that the interactions were taking place. And you just don't see that enough in the business to electively watch the game film, to be able to
right,
say, how do we
right.
make ourselves better? Is that something that you kind of talk about now as far as the way that you guys have gone in a remote environment?
Yeah, so I mean, we've always the benefit I've had. I mean, number one is I've visited, I don't even know, hundreds of AC and plumbing companies, learning from them, right? Um, and the other thing is we've always been really good, and we're always hyper focused on the blocking and tackling, the basic stuff, right? The team who wins the Super Bowl is not the one who's really good at special teams. It's the one who blocks and tackles better. Period. It's just that simple, right? So we've always been very good at the basic stuff. We've always tracked everything, and we've always modularized. So I've always thought of your business as a workflow, from how we market to answering the phones to the follow up before the tech comes out to what's the tech experience, to follow up afterward, tech comes out, to when the salesman comes out. If you could break each one of those processes into its own little module, and you could get crazy with it and just say, what would we do if money was no object? We had unlimited time and resources and people. What would that experience look like? And you start breaking down each one of these modules, and you realize when you think that way and you try to build the perfect experience, where there's no such thing as a perfect experience, right? But you get as close as you can, how close to that perfect experience you can actually get. And then you put tracking to follow to see, hey, did things actually improve when we made these adjustments? And then it becomes real obvious, like, hey, this is our biggest opportunity. It's, hey, we're not creating a great experience in between when the service tech comes out and the salesperson comes out. Maybe that time's too long. Maybe there's not follow up. Maybe there's not expectations. There's 100 things that could go wrong there. But if I've identified that's an opportunity for us, now I start doing exactly what you're saying. We could do ride-alongs. We go through the process. We check those emails and text messages. We look into how much time is being spent in between those two calls, right? So the customer gets cold. Um, it's amazing what you could do when you start thinking of your business less as one action and start thinking of it more like you would a sport. Like when a coach teaches or a coach a basketball game, back to a basketball game, right? They don't focus on, we got to score 110 points. They focus on, hey, we have to take good shots. We have to pass the ball well. We have to have movement. We have to, we have to rebound. We have to be in good position. And if you keep doing those things, somehow we end up scoring 110 points, which is enough to win the game. Right. So that's the kind of way I think about business. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but
No,
I
it
think,
totally does.
yeah.
So you kind of your Parker is growing and growing and growing
Yeah.
and becomes this massive machine.
Ridiculously so. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you transition to Clover? And bring the audience a little bit up to speed what Clover Marketing is all about.
Yeah, so Clover Marketing. Let's do the story first because I think that'll help
Okay.
give you the little origination story or origination story.
Origination.
There we go. Origin story. Either way. So Parker and Sons really was growing exponentially, and I was running the marketing and some of the operations, and still growing exponentially. Father still is the president, CEO. My sister's in the business. My mother's in the business. It's a family business to this day, although we're part of the Wrench Group, so not entirely owned by us anymore. But anyway, we were growing and growing and growing, and it sounds really crazy and it sounds terrible. But there was a time where I could walk through the office and there's so many new faces. And I had an office, right? Like I'm there right in the middle of things. And I remember one time a new CSR, they'd been there like a week. They stopped me and I said, "Can I help you?" Because they thought I was a customer walking through the building. I'm like, that's my office right over there. Like that's when I realized maybe I wasn't as important anymore, right? And it wasn't necessarily an ego thing, but I just wanted something new and challenging. Now I still help Parker and Sons. They're still a client of mine. There's members of Clover Marketing in our jam session program and all that stuff. And we consult and all that fun stuff. But I just decided it was time for a new challenge. So then I launched a software business, which we had a lot of success and sold last year, which is really exciting. I actually was a COO or an executive. I ran sales, then recruiting, and then business development for literally, $1 billion home service company. They were trying to Uberize the home services, which is crazy, crazy task to take on. And then really the last year and a half, I guess, we got back into Clover Marketing, which Clover Marketing was something I've kind of always done in the background, which was working with the largest companies in the United States, and helping them not only do marketing, but improve their operations, make their business more profitable, scale it more effectively, and really more predictable and fun.
So
Because
you've
so
become
many businesses, yeah.
you've used all of your life experience and growing this to make it a full service consultancy, for a lack of better.
Yeah, it's a full service consultancy, but we've actually, so the thing about full service consultancy, which we do, but we really limit who we work with, because like if I'm going to work with you, you better have ambitions to be over 50 million, because if you don't, I do for you anyway. And I'm going to get you there, even if I have to drag you, which is not the best experience. So we don't work with everybody. In fact, we work with very few people on the full consulting side. But we did decide to kind of create what we call an info product, which is, a scalable side of the business to help thousands of contractors grow their business. And that's what we call the Jam Session program. Um, Basically, what we do is we took the same concept to help us grow, which was implementing really effectively. So we help people actually implement and get it done, and then learning from the best in the industry. So, we drop a video every single month with one of the largest contractors in the United States, generally $50 million plus, and we take one idea that they're doing amazing, and we deep dive on it, and then we give them all the implementation on the backwards, the SOPs, the script, how they rolled it out, the incentive plans, and really make it easy for contractors. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. We're super excited about it. And it's growing really effectively, and most importantly, our clients are growing. So we're kind of all over the board now. Like, yeah, we do marketing for some clients, but very few. And we do media buying. We don't do digital marketing or anything like that. We're more the strategy side. We do consulting, but really we're trying to raise all boats and help not just a few dozen contractors get to over 100 million again, but trying to get that guy that's been stuck at 6 million for 10 years to over 10 million, that imaginary barrier that they put in their mind. And it's totally imaginary. It's unbelievable how easy it is to take a business from 6 million to 10 million.
What's interesting, and you bring that up, is that I had a conversation with a particular Nextstar member. We're both pretty familiar with that organization.
Yeah.
And I happened to be at a leadership event, and I just traveled from Philly to Seattle, which might be the toughest flight, one of the toughest flights in all of America. I'm sure Miami to Seattle is probably pretty tough. But so I get in, I'm 3 hours behind, go and sit at the bar, and this guy comes up, and couldn't be the more down-to-earth guy that's out there. And so he was telling me he started his business, lived in the Phoenix market. He and his brother decide that they're going to want to relocate from Phoenix to the Sacramento area. I'll leave the nameless. I need the nameless out there, but you probably know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
And so he says to me, he has 4 pizza businesses, right? And the way that they started their HVAC business was that they started slapping flyers on the pizza boxes for their HVAC business. Okay. And so they determined in the Phoenix market that there wasn't really seasonality, that you could get all 4 seasons. So they picked up their business and moved it to Sacramento. Okay. And he said, we started probably doing like 3.5, right? And we said, if we're going to do 3.5 million, let's get to 6 million. How do we get to 6 million? Let's start hanging out with people who are doing 10 million. He said, once we got to 10 million, we said, how do we get to 15? We got to hang out with people who are doing 20 million. Okay. Once they got to 20 million, they said, okay, well, we want to get to 40 million. So let's start hanging out with people who get to 50 million. Well, they got to 75 million. And then they're like, well, there aren't a lot of people to hang out with.
There's more than ever, but yeah, no, there's probably only maybe a dozen I personally know that are over 100 million right now.
Yeah.
But that's a lot more than they used to be. So,
but the point is that like-minded individuals, they radiate around amongst like-minded individuals to grow their business, to share best practices. And that seems a lot about what the Jam Session is all about, is sharing best practices that are working to be able to help people be involved, and how do they gain from it. And, I think that it's pretty admirable to say, hey, what you're doing is helping out a lot of different businesses grow, where they sometimes get stuck in their own ways.
Well,
because they're not willing to dive into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah. And it's, there's always the thought process too. And like, I've proven this not to be true already. But like, you talk to $1 million business and, they're barely profitable, right? They're just in a not great spot. And they're like, well, how am I supposed to learn from a $50 million business? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're talking about one idea. Maybe you can't implement 100% of it, but you can implement some of it, right? And we take in $1 million businesses to 10 million to 20 million, right? It's the same concepts. A lot of people think, $150 million business, that's entirely different than mine. Well, I mean, here's my problems: recruiting and retention, getting the guys to open their mouths, being thorough, answering phones quickly, right? It's all the same stuff. I just have it at scale. So when I have it at scale, I have to be more creative with my solutions, uh, which works out because you could steal that creativity no matter what size you are and use the same techniques. We just launched a recruiting and retention course, um, like exactly step by step how to defeat the war on recruiting and retention, because there is a war on technicians, especially, right? Um, you'd be amazed. It's not necessarily the size of the business that matters that much. It's how good they are at that individual problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I love the gaining of agreement, and the fact is that it absolutely does. The problems you're going to have at 1.5 million are just going to be 5 times as great when you're at 5.5 million.
Yeah, yeah.
You're,
Same problem though.
you're going to,
It's the exact same problem.
if you go back to Gerber, okay, it's about lead generation, it's about lead fulfillment, it's about leads execution. The rest all falls into play in people's sales profit. But if you're not doing those three things, I don't care if you're doing $1 million, you're doing 100 million. Your concern at Parker and Sons is lead generation to make sure that those 400 trucks and 900 homes that you're going into on a daily basis, you still have, nobody wants to go back from 150 million to 100 million. It's just, it's never going to be a successful venture. No different than you're going to go back from saying, whatever the revenue is that you're doing or somebody else is doing, you're not going backwards, you're moving forwards. And if you are moving backwards, somebody else is going to hit you with the train as you're standing on the tracks. One of the things that we have done here at One SEO is that we kind of look back to basics of some of the aspects of what we did 12 years ago, and how we're, when as an organization you grow, you got to remember the small things that got you to that growth point. How has kind of a back to basics mentality kind of transpired in with the clients that you're working with now?
So I had a client actually explain it to me. Like, so I go in and I help them out, right? And we have conversations. They're on the jam sessions, and I go, I've heard this before. We used to do this. We're pulling a figure eight. I said, what's a figure eight? He's like, that's how we run our business. Like, hey, this is working really, really well. And then we just slowly forget about it. And like, oh crap, this is a big problem again. And we start doing the exact same thing, right? So I personally believe like there's people who try to get real fancy in this industry. They're not the big guys. They're not, I promise you. You all that really matters is the basics. Doing the basics really simply, and then putting the tracking behind so it doesn't fall off. Putting the system behind so it just becomes a part of who you are, not part of how we solve this problem short term. It's one of the worst things you could do is to create a really good solution, uh, fix the problem part time, right? And then forget about that solution. They have to come up with either a new or that exact same solution all over again, as opposed to just making it part of who you are and putting the tracking and the follow through behind. Like a simple example is like, right now, everybody's digging for calls. It's hard to get calls right now. It's just seasonality and depends where you are. It kind of depends how difficult it is. But when the weather's perfect, it's hard to make calls for HVAC companies, right? It's just hard to self-generate. You can, we do, but a lot of it has to be entirely self-generated. So you're going after customer lists, you're sending emails, text message, voiceless ring mails, you're doing direct mail pieces, you're telemarketing to them. All the immediate levers you can pull. Hey, I need calls tomorrow, right?
Yep.
And some companies, and I'm not going to name anybody by name, but even some really big companies, they'll write that email and they'll have a ton of success with it. Oh, that was a great email. It was awesome. And then they never tried to do that again. Like that's a one-off. Like it worked once. It's like, well, why don't you try it again in a few months and see if it still works? And just keep that in your back pocket. Like that was successful. Let's add that to the cadence of things we try. But most people don't think that way. And for the most part, it's because they don't really track, right? It's like, oh, that was really successful. What does really successful mean? What's the goal? What's an ROI, right? Like, people in his marketing, especially marketers who want to market for HVAC and plumbing companies are like, oh man, we get a 7 ROI. I'm like, you realize we're not profitable at a 7 ROI. Like you have to get a minimum of 10 for this even to be feasible, right? That's a 10% marketing cost. I really need it to be 15 to 20 for me to be excited, right? So you have to have the goals in place for each one of your KPIs. You have to have KPIs for each one of your modules inside your business. And you have to constantly be evaluating and saving and reusing and creating systems behind. If this works, let's not reinvent it. Let's just keep using it and not get fancy. Let's keep it simple and use the stuff we know works.
It's funny. I was talking to a couple of people in the office here, and I have a big concern. I'd be curious to hear your thought process on it. With 2020 was like no year that the home service industry has ever seen before.
It was
Um,
amazing.
all right, financially off the charts. Okay.
Oh, everybody who there was two types of people in this industry. There were the people who pulled back and got scared and they got hammered. And then there's everybody else who just decide, hey, we're gonna do business as usual. We're gonna drive, we're gonna use this opportunity to learn. And literally every person we work with, like every person had massive growth without exception. And it's just because number one, everybody's home more often. They're getting less bids. Um, there's eh, we're in a uh, elastic business, a recession resistant business. Like it doesn't affect us that much as long as we just keep our heads down and keep working.
You know,
Anyway, sorry.
so no, that's okay. It's exciting because it was such a great year,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of thought that this upcoming year, people were thinking, I'm just going to do the same thing that I did last year, and I'm going to have the same results. And I'm like, look, you didn't have great results because you had a 2.2% of your marketing budget allocation to the 38% increase in growth that you had. You just didn't change anything. It was the demand that was needed because I had 4 people in my house that were home full time using the same toilet that might have used it 30% of the time. The AC unit, the Wi-Fi, every demand on the home was greater in 2020 than any year in the history of the company or history of any company. Is that now you have to be adjusting to say, what am I going to do to continue to have the incremental growth in my revenue? And how am I being ready for that? Because a lot of people said, hey, you got to make hay while the sun's shining. I'm thinking, how do I make hay again?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, during the recession years, that's our biggest growth years. Everybody else, pulled back and struggled. Not us. Like it's irrelevant what happens in the outside world. We're gonna make it work anyway. Uh,
I have two final questions. The first final question is, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about how you've seen traditionally venture capital groups now coming in saying, whoa, listen, we got this whole field out here that's running 25, 28, 30% margins comparatively to let's invest money in a restaurant group or this particular industry over here. And it seems as if the VC money is infiltrating the home services space. And how do you see that playing out in 2021?
oh, it is. It's not like it seems. It's a fact. Almost the only big company that's still holding out is Four Seasons in Chicago. All the other big players have sold. I mean, there might be someone out there I'm not thinking about, but everybody is sold to someone, right? There's just too much. The multiple peoples are getting are obscene. Like, hey, we would have to continue our growth, and it would still take 15 years to pay that back. Just unbelievable multiples. And when someone offers you an unbelievable amount of money and takes away all your risk, you should at least consider it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So here's my theory on this, and it's pretty simple. VC money, it's going to be part of the business now. I think it's going to be part of the business indefinitely. I don't think it's going to be as strong it is right now, 2, 3, 4 years from now. The reason is those multiples are so insane right now. They're drastically overpaying for companies. It just financially doesn't make sense. They could live with it because they're going to flip it 6 months, year, 18 months from now, and someone else is going to get the bag. But at some point, it's going to be one large company. So like Parker and Sons, we grew 25 million, almost 30 million in 1 year last year. in sales, right? Horizon grew, Service Champions grew. The biggest players, we all had successful years. It takes one of those companies, just one, not to even not grow, but just not hit goals. And all of a sudden, those gigantic, hey, flipping the bag just isn't going to happen. Someone's going to get stuck with a bill, and it's going to be a big deal. I mean, the truth is, like, even the Wrench Group, all of them, right? Eh, all of them could have good years, and Parker and Sons has a bad year because it's so much larger than everybody else. You don't hit the numbers as a whole thing. The whole valuation gets deflated. It becomes a big deal really fast. I don't see that happening this year. I don't see it happening next year. But it's not just Parker and Sons that's the problem. Any big company could fall on their face, and that would be enough. Um, so I don't think it's gonna be as involved as it is now. Like I told a lot of people, like, hey, if you're in a position to sell right now, which not everybody is, but if you are, um, I mean, don't wait 3 years for your business to grow because you don't know if those kinds of multiples are going to still exist. Get a ridiculous multiple and be happy with that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. Some of these larger conglomerate groups, they have full-time acquisition teams that are looking for the guy doing 3 to 5 million out there that they want to snatch it up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Uh, and be able to say, how do we improve our portfolio because of the very reasons that you just put out, which is it's like it's no other time in the space that we've obviously seen. From a business standpoint, and from a business standpoint, this is my last question. And then one of the things that we do, it's kind of like, we call it the final roar here. You kind of get to give, your message to the users and the listeners that we have, as far as the podcast, on advice that you would help them to push their business. But what's the thing that keeps you up at night as it applies to the home services space and the clients that you're working with?
So this has shifted a lot for me throughout my career. So when we were at Parker and Sons, my real fear was someone getting hurt, someone getting injured. And if you're a contractor out there listening to it, that's probably most of your fears. Some of you, it's like making payroll, which is a terrible position to be in. But trust me, someone getting hurt would be far worse. So that was my fear then. Now, I don't, Parker and Sons is, I don't deal with that day to day. I'm not part of that. I'm part
Right.
consulting and helping them, but that's no longer a fear of mine. Really, my biggest fear is just I don't do this because I need money. I don't do this because it's fun and I enjoy this. The main reason I do this is I get a real kick of helping other people achieve their goals. And I have a fear that people aren't going to implement, which is why we pester the crap out of people. And someone's business is going to suffer, or they're not going to have that safety in place, or uh, you know, they don't plan ahead, and they don't achieve those dreams. Like, I've got people, when we get people on board, we're generally we're putting together what we call a dream manager. I don't know if you read that book; it's a great book.
Yep.
Um, and we're asking, like, hey, why do you want to grow this business to 20 million? You're at 5 million now. Why 20 million? It's a random number to me. And I'll have them explain, like, hey, because I want to be able to buy this house. I want to put my kids to college, or whatever they give us. We write these down, right? And then we put timelines to them, and we make sure they actually achieve them, which is pretty powerful. But when those timelines get close and they're not done yet, that's what puts a lot of fear into me right now. Is like, hey, I told you I was going to achieve this with you. I'm doing my part. You have to be doing your part. We have to make sure this happens. So it's the same fear I've always had, I guess, is fear of failure, fear of not doing enough. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that answers that or
No,
not.
it does. It absolutely does. Because, I think that as any type of sale that whether you're selling an HVAC system, that's a dual system that's going to make their house, whatever it might be, you're going to fix their plumbing needs, whether you're going to help them from a digital marketing standpoint. At the end of the day, when you're having that conversation, it's about your word and, hey,
Yeah.
what can I do to accomplish it? And it's got to be a two-way street and a partnership in anything you do. And, a colleague of mine used to say, if I have to get stalker ex-girlfriend on you to get done the deliverables that I need, then we got a problem that we got to address.
Look outside in the bushes. I'm there.
Exactly, because you're never going to get. I can't. I can't answer a review for you as effectively as you can because you had that conversation with that client. Can I tell you, you should put some keyword-centric terms into that review and make sure that that review gets responded to, good or bad, ugly or indifferent. And you need to solicit those reviews, whether you spiff your guys, whether you use a podium, whether you use a Zyrotalk, whatever you're doing, you need to ask for those reviews. But I can lead you to the well, but you got to want to drink. So
Yeah.
with that being said, the final roar, like I said, is the advice that you can give to our audience that's going to help them push their businesses, okay, through, let's say, the next couple of months, because we are in a very uncertain time, and change of administrations, vaccines, non-pandemic, pandemics, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, forget about the political aspect of it. But what's the advice that Josh can give to those businesses out there?
So I'm gonna push back a little bit first. So uncertainty is only a show of lack of preparation. So if you're uncertain right now, you've been in this position before. It's the same time of year. We had the same issue last year. You know what's coming. You know it's going to be different. You better do something different. But my advice is really simple: is you better have really quality tracking. You better be A/B testing. You better be trying new things constantly and seeing what works. You better be implementing. This is our biggest. This time of year is the time of year where we actually have time to make changes, to actually do things. Don't come up with ideas and not get them done, not try them. So to me, it's tracking, implementation, get back to the basics, and just go. Don't sit on your hands and wait for the phone to ring. That's a fool's errand. It's real uncertain if you're waiting for the phone to ring. It's way less if I'm going out and making the phone ring. And there's a lot of people think there's ways. The only way to do that is to spend a lot of money. I can promise you that is not the case. Text messages are incredibly cheap. Emails are practically free. Social media is practically free. There are so many ways to do this. Just don't sit on your hands and wait. That's the worst thing you could do.
Well,
And then I gotta say one more thing because I'm gonna
yeah,
get
go
in
for
so
it.
much trouble if I don't do this. I know we talked about the $100 million contractor playbook. That's something we put together for free for everyone. It's basically we take the three biggest problems in our industry, which is marketing, recruiting, retention, and really improving your sales. And we put it all in the book with super actionable stuff. And we're giving it away for free. Just go to our website, growwithclover.com, and there's a button right at the top that says free gifts. Click on that and you'll get the $100 million playbook. So I would be in so much trouble if I didn't mention that.
Well, I was going to wrap it up with saying, first of all, thank you very much for your time and making sure that people knew how to get in touch with the $100 million contractor playbook, which obviously you beat me to the thunder. And so I thank you very much for the time today. And I look forward to our continuing in our relationship. Kind of extends beyond just kind of having a podcast, but growing together. And I wish you nothing but the best in your business and continue making people's dreams come true.
Well, I appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to follow me at Lance Bachman on Instagram and Twitter. Follow me on Facebook at Lance Bachman Digital. And every Thursday we drop a new podcast. Don't forget to listen to it. We're giving out great content. And remember this is the time to build your business right now. Let's effing go, everybody.